I believe we're on podcast. You know, this is Scully Sez podcast, and of course, I'm here with Patrick today, and Patrick's going to tell us what we're supposed to do, if anything.
Yeah, make sure that you like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. You want to follow us on Facebook. You want to follow us on Apple Music, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And just, follow, share, and give us a listen.
Give us a listen. All right, and so besides that, our topic for today, if I'm not mistaken, is mass transit. Is that what I'm to understand?
Yeah, yeah. So I feel like as a car guy, this is one of those ones that's a very contradictory interest of mine, because obviously mass transit is the enemy of non-mass transit, which would be cars. But,
Yes. Yes.
I think it's a meritorious conversation.
And so, what is your position on this? Are you?
Well, I think that it's interesting, right? So we are a country that has the most rail of any country. We do. Like, we have the most track laid. But we
Yes.
have possibly the most lacking as far as interstate public transit, and I'm speaking more specifically than overarching public transit, but more specifically about rail. You know, Rail was what built our country. Rail is what got us out west. You know what I mean? Rail is what got people from New York to Chicago. That's what rail did. And then at a certain point, it became used as freight only. And so I
Yes.
guess part of that is what I want to unpack and figure out what I know about what it does. Maybe you'll probably have some understanding of it too, because you lived through a lot of these decisions too.
Well, I think that particularly in Hammond, Indiana, I think that one of the things that Hammond has is as a benchmark is that it has more rail per square mile than any other city in the country. We just got a lot of rail, and but very little of it is devoted to mass transit. Most of it is freight.
Right.
So, so we've got freight coming from Canada. We've got freight throughout the country, basically. But this is, of course, they call this the crossroads of the country, which in fact it is.
Right.
And of course, Chicago was known as being a freight capital as well. And so that's basically what we have. We have just a lot of freight coming out of this area.
Well, yeah, and it's kind of like Chicago is almost used by really most of North America, especially like Canada and stuff. Chicago really is like a big international intermediary, like a lot of stuff comes in through, Canada and makes its way to Chicago, but by the same token, the other way around is true as well. A lot of stuff came not so much comes out of Chicago now, but a lot of stuff did used to come out of Chicago and go elsewhere. So the freight, I understand why the freight was so fleshed out, as a system. Like obviously it makes sense when you have the steel mills, you have Ford plants, you have, military stuff that you're sending on the trains, you have whatever, all the different things that you could have in Chicago that you're sending around. I understand why it'd be fleshed out. But then what I can't understand, what blows my mind is that if you want to leave and go to Indiana from Chicago, which is the closer state to it. It's not like Wisconsin's closer. Indiana's right there. And if I want to do that, there's one line, right? And it's private. Or I guess that's not true. There's metros as well, right? By you.
Yes. Well, all right. So this is my understanding of the situation. Of course, you know that I grew up in Philadelphia and New York. So at that time, there were large railroad companies. There was a New York Central, and the biggest in the country was the Pennsylvania Railroad. Both of those are now gone, and so we have Metro, I guess, or
Or Amtrak.
Amtrak. Yes. So, so we have that going. But then again, in Philadelphia, particularly, when you talk about mass transit, we talked about the Reading Railroad, and the Reading Railroad basically is now been absorbed now into Amtrak. And then, but more importantly, when you talk about mass transit, I think a lot of times what you're doing is you're talking about local. So you're
Right.
talking about if you're in Columbus, Ohio, you're talking about getting from one of the suburbs into downtown, and
Right.
so and so you either need a train, you need a bus to do that. Now, back in the day, in Philadelphia particularly, they had what they call the Broad Street subway, and then they also had the L, and then they had what they call the trolleys, and they're all on tracks. You see, but here is the unspoken, or people do not talk about it. But here's the reason why, in my opinion, these it's diminished is safety. Safety.
Right.
You, I used to take the Broad Street subway all the time. You do not want to do that today. I used to take the L. You do not want to do that today. I used to take the trolley. You do not want to do that today. Now, those people that do are usually poor people. And the poor people, they have to get to work, and they do not have an automobile, or they
Or they'll have
can't.
like one in their family or
That
something.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the case. And so usually these folks, they're on these trains, on these buses, or whatever, and you look at the floor, you look out the window, but you dare not make eye contact with anybody because, of course, you're going to get the hell beat out of you if you're lucky. If you're
Right.
lucky, if you're not so lucky, well, then you notify next of kin.
Right.
So, and so you're on the train, and you have some nut with a knife in his hand, and that's the end of you. And that's what's been going on throughout most of these cities. So my thought is that the government, at the very least, has an obligation to protect you, to keep you safe. You see. Now, back in the day, I can remember when things were starting to get a little bit hairy, they would have a cop. He would walk through the trains, and he'd have his friend, which was a canine, with him. You see.
Right.
And there was very little commotion. People do not like to get bitten by dogs. They just don't like it.
Right.
And so these troublemakers, basically, they stayed in line. But you see, we're going to save money, don't you see? And so we no longer have these cops on there. We no longer have the dogs on there. And as a result, we have less and less riders on the train because they're afraid. And that's really what they. So when you talk about mass transit, and you talk about mass transit, say, in places like in Asia, it works quite well
Right.
because the people sit there and they behave themselves. Actually,
Well,
even
they adhere to the social contract, right?
yes, yes. Even in Europe, although it's getting worse now with the immigration problem that they've had, particularly in places like Sweden and France and so on. So that's becoming something of a problem too. But transportation, mass transit, in theory, is a great thing. It's a great thing because it moves large number of people very efficiently from one place to another. But of course, you want to get there alive, or you want to get there, in one piece. And so that's really what people are not talking about. But that's really the underlying problem with mass transportation. People just do not feel comfortable.
Well, I think that's a big portion of it. Like, when I lived in Chicago, like I used the train all the time, but I never used the bus. I was never going to use the bus. The bus was like, and I think in most cities it's the truth. The bus is a significant step down from the train. The exception would be like a New York Express bus. You know what I mean? I understand those are relatively normal-ish because those are people going to work on an express bus. They have no other way to get there other than the ferry from Staten Island, right? So that makes sense. That could be I could see that bus having utility. Buses on campuses, they have utility. But like a normal city bus, I've ridden them, multiple times throughout my life, but I just every time leave with the feeling like, oh God, like even if it's not dangerous, it's gross. You know what I mean? And that's just, I mean, that's still the same thing. You know what I mean? Being around people who are getting sick and are, behaving a certain way, whatever. You just don't want to be there. Um, I think that uh, the danger for me is actually secondary of the problem. I think that it's a huge part of it. I think it's probably the number two reason why public transit's not big, because why would you not want to, if you can lease a car for within a couple $100s a month of, doing the train, why would you not do the train? Or why would you not do the car, rather? It's personal luxury, or whatever. You have your own space. You can smoke a cigarette if you want to, listen to your music, max volume. You know what I mean? Like, I see the utility. Again, I'm a car guy, so like, I totally get it. But I think that they're dangerous too, right? Like, a car is dangerous too. Road rage, people flipping you off, people freaking out, people whatever. I think that the danger isn't the actual reason why it's not implemented. I think the danger is the reason why now it's not going to be implemented quite as much, which obviously is important, because we want to get to a place where people can move freely and whatever. But I think the biggest thing is that our country is kind of run by lobbyists to a degree, like, of course, like, it's a follow the money type of country because we're capitalist. And so, like, when you follow the money of early development of, like, passenger light rail and stuff like that, you'd have people like Henry Ford stepping in to try and kind of curb that, because obviously it worked directly against him trying to sell this new product, the personal automobile. You know what I mean? He had to create an entire niche. Obviously he didn't invent the automobile, but he, for anyone who doesn't know, who's listening, he's the architect of the modern car buying experience, the modern car sales experience, building experience, all of that. Yeah, everything that is what we know about cars today, Henry Ford is truly the pioneer of. He just didn't invent the car, and he didn't, like, he wasn't the only car or anything like that. You know what I mean? But they had 14 million Model Ts in the world by 1914. So he had a huge vested interest in keeping people off trains. And I think that at first that was only focused on big, like, interstate trains. Like, it was focused on, like, why connect Chicago and Cincinnati? What's really the point? Does it really matter? You know what I mean? They can just someone can take I-75 or I-65 or whatever, I think that when it started that way, that was okay for a little bit. But now, as we get to the point where the internet has made the world so small, but, like, distances are still, like, relatively within the same scope as, like, it took to travel in, like, the 70s. You're still in a similar ballpark to cross the country and to do everything. I mean, even slower if you count the Concorde, right? And not having access from, like, a person who lives in, like, Dayton, Ohio, or Erie, Pennsylvania, or Kansas City, Missouri, for that person who can see everything that their country has to offer, but doesn't have the ability to access it, maybe because they don't have enough money, that driving is daunting to them, whatever, all these other reasons, having light rail would be really a big thing for them. And the other thing about it is, I think that since COVID, a lot more people have been, like, sitting in their house and not really doing quite as much, like, they've just kind of, like, it's allowed for a more sedentary lifestyle to become prevalent. And as those people become more and more sedentary, things like getting in the car, driving 7 hours to Chicago become more and more daunting. Finding parking becomes this anxiety thing, or what am I going to do? All these iterations of what could happen become, stops from these people going and experiencing their life. And I think that's why when you go to, like, Europe, it's a different conversation, because, like, wow, like, when I go to Europe, I rent a car and I drive, because I like to drive stick and I like to experience the different roads, whatever. But also, the accessibility of Europe is, like, when we were in Portugal, we were in Lisbon, and we took the train to Cintura. We wouldn't have done that unless that fleshed out public transit exists. We would have never experienced the other place. You know what I mean? Because it's just like, how do we get there? So I basically said two things and a little bit of word vomit there. Is one, I think that the real thing was that lobbyists stopped trains because it hurt the auto industry, mainly the auto industry. And the other thing is, I think the real big problem with us not having trains is as the world gets smaller and smaller and smaller, it like, people are starting to get more and more restless in needing these experiences that,
Well, I have a little bit of different take on that. For example, I want to go into Chicago. So let's say that I want to drive there. And so I drive there, I'm going to a hearing or something there, and I park. We went to Marshall Fields, went to Macy's the other day, right? Spent a couple hours there. $50.
Oh yeah.
$50. Now, you go there every day, and let's say you get such a deal. It's only going to be $45, see? $45 a day, 5 days a week, 4 days. You're talking $1,000 a month
Right.
to park. Now,
Right.
if that doesn't happen, if you're trying to find a place to park on the street, that's another problem. And if you've got, so there's a lot of
I mean,
incentives.
a pass is $200 a month minimum too. By the way, like it's not like it. If someone listens to that, hears that, they're like, oh well, why would you park on the street? To get a garage pass is $200 a month minimum for anywhere in Chicago.
Well, and so there you go. So if it's that expensive and people are still willing to drive, there's a reason why they're willing to pay all that money and not get on mass transit.
Right.
Now, it just in the very short period of time that I've been, well, I won't say short period of time, but in the 40 or 50 years in this area, there were buses there were buses in Hammond, there were buses in Gary, and they're gone. There was a bus that used to take, I used to get a bus to take me into Chicago. It's gone. So, and so the question becomes, do we have a commitment to mass transportation? And if we do, then of course that's one thing that the government can get involved in. And if they get involved in it, then they've got to get involved in a meaningful way. It's got to be in such a way that people feel safe there, that it's convenient, and that it fills the needs of the commuter. But as it is right now, even in a place like Chicago, you do have buses. You have buses, but and you have the South Shore. The South Shore Railroad is a railroad that's basically it's been around for probably 100 years
At least, yeah.
and it struggles. It struggles.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so
I think just a total side note here for flavor. I'm pretty sure that the South Shore line actually, the emblematic of its struggles are those cars. I'm pretty sure are actually always, they have to buy another rail company's decommissioned subway cars to run them. That's why the South Shore line cars. I've ridden it. Last time I rode it was like 3 years ago, but like their cars are like genuinely very dated. It's very interesting because most of the time that's not the case. Like most of the time these companies have hundreds of millions of dollars to throw at these problems, but it sucks because like I was just saying, that's one of the only ways to get there. Yeah, you can take the Metro, but the Metro's a different experience than the South Shore line. The South Shore line is like a local line. You know what I mean? Like it's like not a giant company. It's not you got to have your Ventra bucks to get on it or whatever. And that's the whole other problem with Chicago, by the way, is selling your payment processing for your public transit to like a private company is just that was a weird move. You know what I mean? Like that's one of those things that, the Metro card definitely is a much more sensible revenue generator than, whatever the heck Ventra is. But
to get back to the original idea, in New York on the subway, it used to be, it was the general way people got to work.
Right.
The subway. So you would have on the same train, you'd have somebody that was on welfare, and then you'd have a guy that was a millionaire. You have the president of a company and somebody unemployed. They'd both be on the same train together, because that was the way you got around in New York. But as you know, these stories are coming out where even on the platforms, they're dangerous places. The subway's a dangerous place to be, so I think what's got to be done is that there's got to be, and I don't see it, but there's got to be an effort on part of the government to either make these forms of transportation palatable, and if they're not, then of course people are not going to use them.
Well, people might cringe at this, but I've always found it like very weird that there's no TSA at all for trains. I don't think that it would need to be at all as fleshed out as it is for planes, because I understand planes are pressurized, they're in the air. Anything bad happens, it's catastrophic. But I mean, it's not like a train, like as someone doing something bad on a train would like not be catastrophic. It's still enclosed. You know what I mean? You're still getting the public in a space enclosed. Like, you would think there would be some TSA oversight. I mean, maybe not baggage check and stuff like that, but like, you right? Like you would think. To me, my biggest misconception about the subway when I was before I'd ever like lived in a city and experienced it was that it was like there's cops here and there's cops here. And there's cops here. At most, they would be like watching the turnstile, like basically being like revenue guys, but they're not worried about something actually happening. They're sitting, two of them usually together, in their high vis vest, and they're like leaned up against the side, and they're talking about whatever they're talking about, just pointing tourist point A to point B. I hated on that guy. You know what I mean? Like, whatever. But they're not actively in there. There's no intervention in like the crazy weird people sitting on the platform or the crazy person on the train or in the train car. I remember actually when I kind of got turned off to it a little bit, and to be clear, I do think that there should be more transit, but I also do agree with you that danger is a problem. When Emma, she used to work at University of Chicago, or study at University of Chicago, and so she would take the train down there. And I remember she took the train down there, and then she was gonna get back super late, so she like had to get back on the train at 8 o'clock, and I like hate that. So I usually would like go and pick her up, but this time I couldn't. I didn't have the car up there or whatever, so she came up. So she got back home at like 8:30 or whatever, and then on my Citizen app, it said. I think I don't remember the exact numbers, but like I think 87th or 63rd or something around there, somewhere between there is where her stop was, and on 63rd someone had just gotten shot and killed, and their dead body was left on the subway. Like within 30 minutes of her getting off the subway and like walking into the house, you know what I mean? Like that happened. And again, it was gang violence. It's whatever. It's in a crazy area. Everyone from Chicago understands like there's certain areas you don't really. You just kind of like leave it to whoever's going to be there, that's not for you. And that's one of those areas. But like at the same time, dude, like that was, I mean, we literally spent $200 a month to keep the car in Chicago, even though we didn't have that money to do that. You know what I mean? Because it was just like, it became a necessity as opposed to a luxury.
Yeah. Well, that of course is the situation is people are afraid. And I guess the question is, there's a tension, to my mind. There is a tension between safety and control. And so the safer you become on the train, the more control there is on the train. In other words, the government is more controlling. They are involved in it much more. They have police presence there. They have and so. You're safer, but then of course you're somewhat constrained. There's not much that you can do. You sit down, you mind your business, and you don't cause any problems. And there is a resistance to that in this country, which is why people like to use the car, because they can do whatever the heck they want in the car, where they can't do that on the train.
Right.
So, but that's the problem that you have, and. As you can see, we're having some of these problems right now in some of the major cities. The people are being told that they have to do certain things, and they don't like that. And so, as a result, they do whatever they do. But sometimes they protest, sometimes even violently, that they don't want to be told what to do. And so that's the problem with mass transportation. You don't seem to have that problem. I've been in mass transportation, particularly in Asia and in Europe as well, and it seems to run quite well.
Yeah, it's much more literally cleaner, and then no one's really violating the social contract quite as much. You don't even get like the like, I hate even in like New York, the guy like playing the guitar on the thing, or the people who are doing like interviews on the thing. And there's a guy who is a famous guy, Subway Takes. They make a really cool show, or he makes a really cool show, where he like interviews people on the subway. That's cool. Whatever. There's a super cool, vibe to be had, with that culture. I get it. But like, even those things, like those may not be insidious on their own, but like those are like breaking down that social barrier where
Yep.
it's like you're entitled to my private time, and like it's not my fault that it's better for it's not my fault that it's better to get around, and it's more efficient, and it's more economically or ecologically whatever viable. It's not my fault that you don't get to take away my personal time when I'm coming home from work and I'm de-stressing and I'm sitting in here, maybe have my headphones in and I'm just vibing, listening to my music. I don't need to talk to you. I don't need to look at you. I don't need to, and that's good. You know what I mean? That's like the good way to be on the train. I feel like it's just kind of be about yourself and do your own thing.
Yes.
But people can't help themselves here as much, and you have a lot more humbleness in Asian countries for sure. There's a lot more humility, where they're like, it's almost like seen as rude to be the one who stands out, which maybe is a step too far, but at the same time, that does create for a society where you can like go and enjoy things on your terms. You know what I mean? It's not, there's a lot less of that. I don't even know what to say, but there's a lot less of that influence from other people in your own, experiences.
Yeah, well, I think that people don't want to be told what to do, particularly in the United States. They don't want to be told what to do. They want to be made to do certain things. So as a result, there's a resistance. And even if it wasn't dangerous, there's sort of a resistance to use mass transportation. It's not I don't want to do that. I got to sit there. I got to just read my newspaper. Whereas if I'm in my car, I can smoke a cigarette. I can listen to the radio. I can do. And so there's a resistance to mass transportation, even if it was safer, because we are not a conformist society, and I think that the conformist society, like you'll see in Asia, tends to deal with mass transportation much better.
Well, I mean, and the numbers back that up, like the travel numbers. So, like, I pulled a couple of them just like before we did the show, just to like have a couple things to say. So this is basically like the percentage of passengers who are traveling in the country that opt to use light rail. So in the United States, we have the biggest light rail network, or the biggest rail network in the world. Our country has the biggest one by far. It's 225 to 250,000 kilometers. I don't know how there's a gray area there, but whatever. Anyways, so we use 1% of our total travel happens on trains. 1%.
Yes.
Which is crazy. Which by the way, it's 1%, I think, is like still like several, like tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions. But in China, they use their rail for the equivalent of 4 billion trips a year, right? In Japan, they use, I think it was like 25 billion. Here, let me see if I have it right here. Yeah, it's like 25 billion passenger miles traveled or something like that. And it's an entirely different way to navigate your life when when your personal car becomes, again, like a flavor pick now. Now you can go and say, ooh, like now I have a Corvette, and that's my only car because I don't need my car to go to work. I don't need my car to go to the store. I don't need my car, and it's just for fun. Or I have no car, and I've spent that money on making my house better. Or no, I have no car, and I don't care about making my house better. Whatever. It just, there is a certain amount of freedom that it allows you, even though you cede a certain amount of control in order to like participate in that public transit. There's also it's one of the few exchanges where you might cede some freedom in order to make public transit better, but like you also gain freedom in your own life by having more money and more disposable income, and also having like more flexibility with how you're going to deal with your own personal transportation options and stuff. I think that what's kind of insane is when you look at our rail network is, like I said, the biggest in the world. But then you look at our interstate system, that's what we opted to invest in, was our interstate system as opposed to rail like a lot of European countries did. But what blows my mind is that most of these interstate systems are perfectly available to integrate, right down the center of 70. Why wouldn't you put a train there? You know what I mean? Like what would be the argument against it? And obviously expense, it's probably like expense versus ridership, but Amtrak moves 28 to 30 million trips a year. I mean, that's you have to pay a lot for it. You know, Amtrak's not cheap, and Amtrak's only taking you out west or to Philly or New York. Like, I don't think you can. I don't even know if maybe you can Amtrak out of Cincy as well. I'm not really sure, but I don't. I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know where you would maybe Amtrak to Atlanta, but like it's like they're small. You know, it's like one stop here, one stop there. It's not like a network that is super comprehensive. So if you can get 30 million people on this like essentially luxury item, and I'm sure a lot of them are suburban riders who are taking, you know, that have like the pass, whatever, a monthly pass, yearly pass, whatever it is, but. I mean, if they have 28, 30 million, you would think that the U.S. government building infrastructure like that would make some sense, but I guess not. But so 80 to 90% of our rails are freight. Okay, we move 1.9 trillion ton kilometers, which again, that's basically the same thing as like passenger miles. It's just how many miles the load, I guess, is traveled, or an individual load is traveled. But so we're 1.9 trillion miles. We have like the most used rail network too. So it's not like we don't have the engineers and we don't have the infrastructure. We don't, you know what I mean? Like we do have it. We use rail a whole bunch. And I just, you know, almost all of the passenger trains that go long distance already operate on freight lines. So if they're already operating on a freight line, I can't for the life of me understand the hang up. You know what I mean? It's like we have a line in Columbus that goes right through Dayton, up near to you guys, and then when it goes down the other way, and it goes down through West Virginia, and it like ends up in like Hilton Head or something like that. What realistically, I'm sure there's a lot of costs. You have to build a platform, you have to build whatever. But like, you would think there would be a proof of concept attempt to try that line, right? Or try stuff like that.
Well, my experience has been, and I think that there are a couple places in the country which they have rails that operate pretty well for the average person that's traveling from city to city. One of the places is in D.C., and the place is they have these high speed rails that are devoted entirely to passengers. What the problem is in our country was we have, as you pointed out, we have freight. And so I can remember, this is many years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I decided that instead of driving to Pittsburgh from here, I would take a train. So, you know, it'd take me at least 4 hours, 5 hours to get to Pittsburgh, but if I drove. So I decided, well, I'd take a train. Train would be much quicker, and I'd be able to do it that way. So I was downtown Chicago, and I got on this train at about 7 o'clock, and I had a meeting to get to at 9 o'clock the next morning. Okay, so I was thinking to myself, well, if this is going to be quicker than driving a car, and I'm going to get there, you know, 1 o'clock in the evening or so, it's, you know, what am I going to be doing with that extra time that I have? Well, as it turned out, I didn't have any extra time. I had to run to get to the meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning. So what did that mean? That meant that I was on a train from 7 or 8 o'clock the meeting before until 8 o'clock the next morning. Now,
right.
So what would happen is any time that a freight train came along, you'd pull off to the siding or something, and the freight train would, because that's where the money is. The money's with the freight. So even as long ago when I was in service, this is ancient times. Ancient times, we were going down to South Carolina. It took us something like 14 hours, 15 hours, because almost you get maybe 100 miles, and you have to pull up to the side because the freight train would be coming down, and that's where the money is being made by the freights. So what you'd have to do, you'd have to make an investment that you don't use the same line as the freight trains do. You'd have to, and so when you have these what they call these high speed lines, they seem to do better. You know, aside from the safety factor, the subways in New York, they seem to carry historically many more people more efficiently because there was no freight line involved with them.
Right, they're not pulling off and waiting for yeah, exactly,
Yes,
exactly.
yes. So,
And you know what's interesting is so we have 250,000 or 250 kilometers of rail in America. China operates 48,000 kilometers of high speed rail alone.
mm-hmm.
So that's like the amount of that's to I give an idea of the scope. Like it would be they're running what is that? About a quarter of or about a fifth of what we run total in just high speed rail. And I feel like you know when people start to say like beat their chest about like oh we're losing the battle to China or you're falling behind China, we're falling behind China. For a long time I thought that was kind of like stupid. You know I would just be like yeah okay great like whatever you know. But the more you like read about China, the more you like look at that country and the way that country's developing. I mean trust me, socially I think they're still you know years and years behind, but that doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like like the actuality is their infrastructure is like superior, you know, by quite a large margin. And granted, it's because a lot of it's new built. You know, it's not old stuff. But at that same time, you know, it gets frustrating when we know we're the best country in like a lot of regards, and we're you know, there's still people who will never experience the city 6 hours over because they like just don't have a car. You know what I mean? Like that's bothersome to me because like I think that if we looked at public transit as more of like a public service and less of like a necessity, because like of course it's a necessity, of course it is. So is you know drinking water, so is whatever. But drinking water isn't just a necessity. Like you could just like put bullshit drinking water into someone's house. You have to take care of it because it's health and it, you know, development and it's all those things. And so we treat it like that. And we treat it like, you know, the idea of public transit is to like culturally enrich people from different areas and to widen local reach, you know, that there's something there. And I mean, again, I'm a business owner who is off 70. So I would love if they put a rail down 70. That would be great for me. You know what I mean? I'll deliver to the station all day long. But like, you know, even selfishness aside, I think that, you know, having a little bit of a return to form of the way that like travel used to be, at least long distance travel, where people were up and they were walking and they were getting their meal and they were talking, like the experience we had when we were in Sweden on the boat. You know, yes. I feel like even though that's a tour, that's not transportation. But to me, in my mind, in my romanticized view of past transit, that was much more like what taking a train in the U.S. was in maybe like the 30s or 40s or 50s.
Yes, yes.
And I think that, you know, of course, clothing styles change and attitudes change and decorum is like lower than it's been in a long time, especially, you know, I mean, if you look at the way our government officials interact with each other, you can just see the erosion of a lot of these like social, you know, behaviors. But like that is a good, like not the erosion of the behaviors is a good thing, but like us returning to that transit form where we're like in there and it's clinking of glasses and people having a couple drinks and eating and having kids run around and play and they're meeting other kids and all that. That's a good thing. Like that's a positive thing, you know, like you want people to have experiences where they like interact with other Americans and mesh with other Americans and then just go their separate ways with the good experience, you know, like those are good interactions and good things.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, but I think what happens is you're going to lose money on public transportation. You're going to lose money on it, and
for sure,
you have to make the investment, and it's a substantial investment. And of course, a lot of the problem is even today, when we say SEPTA, when we say Amtrak, there's a lot of government financing that goes into this, and it you know, I don't know. I don't know whether it's the lack of commitment or lack of planning or just the American type of people that we are. We're just not going to use mass transportation. So
well, and that's it's weird because it's like I know a couple of years ago, Kasich, when he was the governor here in Ohio, they kind of basically gave him his rail plan, or not his, but someone else had put a rail plan up for Ohio. And so the idea was, I don't know if it was high speed or if it was just going to be light rail, like modified freight lines, but it was supposed to be from Cleveland to Columbus to Chicago, potentially a stop up, like a bootleg down to Dayton and do it that way. But it was going to be basically the 3 Cs. That was called 3 Cs line. And if we're connected to Cleveland, Cleveland actually does have Amtrak to Chicago, Amtrak to New York, so then that connects you to a place where you can branch out and go to the rest of the country from, which is pretty cool. But it just never happened. The funding was there, the money was there, the votes were there, he got the opportunity, and I'm sure there's, again, it's a complicated job. It isn't an easy job to run a state, but like, I don't know what ended up happening about it, and I don't know what he ended up doing, and it doesn't, it's one of those things that the further we kick it down the line, the worse it looks as an option. You know what I mean? But like, if someone just breaks ground and makes this crazy investment that would totally look like a waste of money, in 30 years, who knows what the adoption rate looks like? Maybe that does change Ohio into some sort of, place where people do use that public transit more constantly. And even honestly, using public transit's almost like a misnomer of what we're really talking about. It's not even just the public transit. I think the public transit could be better, for sure. But like, even the private long distance, mass transit would be the better term. Even the public or the private mass transit options are not great. They're really not great. I mean, Amtrak is all right. I've ridden Amtrak a lot. I've ridden a lot of Metra. Metra's fine. They're cool cars. They're good. It's whatever. But like, it's not an optimal way to, like, if I wanted to go to California tomorrow and I couldn't get a flight, it's not better than me driving. You know what I mean? It's not even close. Like, so I don't know what they want.
Well, here, I don't know the answer. I just know what the problem is. Take the Gary transportation system. Now, you have a bus. The bus, I don't know what the bus costs. Maybe it costs, what, $400,000, $500,000? I don't know what a bus costs. Big bus. Now you've got that. Now you've got the bus driver. Okay, so the bus driver gets paid. What's he get paid? Certainly $40,000 a year, hopefully.
Easily, I'd imagine, yeah.
We'd hope so. And you get on that bus, and now you got to pay for the fuel, whether it be electric, whether it be gas, whatever. But usually in the Gary, it's gas. So you've got the fuel, you've got the cost, and so you get on the bus, and you're the only person on the bus.
Right.
Now, how long can you sustain something like that? So that's the question.
That's that airline shit too, right? Is like, that's kind of what they do, is they're trying to pack as many people as possible into these. And yeah, I would say probably like maybe half of the flights that I book are full. So
Yes.
so at least on the plane, I'll give it some credit where credit's due. Like, they do a pretty good job of packing people into the plane and making sure it's not, whatever.
Yeah.
But other transit does the same thing. Like, I was just thinking about the Metra cars that we ride in back and forth from the north suburbs into Chicago. It's a double decker. So you have a second row to sit on. There's 2 rows up top. You can sit on the
Yes.
2 seats up top. Then
Yes.
there's 2 seats on the bottom.
Yes.
Why would you not have that? Like, just cut that in half, the amount of seats, and put tables and make it back to like a normal train configuration. It's greed is the only reason. It's the only reason because, oh, well, if we can get this full train, we can make that. And I get it. Not all of it's just greed. Some of it is just trying to make a buck in an industry that's probably very, very hard to turn a profit in,
Yes.
But
yes.
like, at the same time, like, there is a balance to strike. Like, there's a reason that like Mercedes doesn't have to mark down their cars, even though they depreciate worse than any other car. You know what I mean? It's not because they've made their brand be what it is, and you go and buy it for them, not because it's the most sensible decision. You know what I mean? And like, so if an Amtrak was just so comfortable and so much of a better option than going across the country in your car, maybe people would choose it even at a premium.
Yeah, well, the problem is, of course, even with even trying to jam people in on these buses or what have you, even that, it still needs government subsidies. So,
Right.
So it's really not that they're trying to make as much money as possible. They're trying to make the losses as little as possible. So that's the problem. It's difficult. It's difficult. Another thing that's difficult is in the United States, we live further apart from other people.
Right.
You see, so if everybody is living in a large building. Say you've got 1,000 people in this building, well, then it's relatively easy for those people to walk out the door and catch a bus.
Right.
But if you've got 1,000 people and takes 1,000 people, it's a mile long stretch of those people. It's going to be very, very difficult to make a buck if you're a bus company, and that's why a lot of these bus companies have gone out of business. They just
Yeah, Greyhound and
Yes.
Megabus or whatever.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yeah, all those, yeah, yeah. So we're not that tightly packed as a culture. So I suppose that's also part of it.
Yeah, that's the probably it all everything aside. That's probably the most real reason why it just never hit for us like that. I mean, of course, Russia is also super far apart, but like I think that Russia's like very dense in this corner of Russia,
Yes.
the first corner, and then it's like super desolate out that way. Like it's just, very rural and whatever. So if that's the case, then it's like, well, that's not even a fair 1-to-1, right? Because like we are densely populated for everywhere. Like the middle of our country is a little bit less populated, but I mean,
Yep.
you could throw a rock and hit a million population city in America. You know what I mean? Like every Tulsa, Oklahoma, I'm sure is a million population city. I would be amazed if it's not more. But like, the us living so far apart is probably a big portion of that because, it's a lot harder to say, hey, let me travel from Ohio to California via a train than it is to say like, oh, let me travel from like, London to, Versailles or something. Like from that trip is like 3 hours and you're in a different country and you're in this whole other thing, you know what I mean? And like for us it's like, oh yeah, I've been in Oklahoma for the past 7 hours because we're going through the panhandle, you know what I mean? Like,
Well, that takes us to the point that the question is there anything that can be done that's going to make mass transportation, more palatable to the average American, or is it just something that can't be done?
well, to me, I think, excuse me, I could think of a couple things. I could think that I think that if you were to have, like, Elon had a decent idea with the Hyperloop, where they're building the tunnels, and then
Yes.
basically you pull your Tesla into it, and then you press the self-driving button, and then it can exceed its self-driving limits, and
Yep.
it'll go like 140 miles an hour through the
Yep.
tunnel because it knows,
Yep. Yep.
that to me, and I have a lot of experience driving in every build of full self-driving for the past year. That I would be chill with that. That is totally fine to me, and that
Yep.
would work great.
Yep.
The other thing is that him doing that, he's doing the boring thing. That's also like utilities and all that type of stuff gets snuck in while he's doing that. It's not like this is I guess he's not driving the thing, but while Boring Company is doing it, you're sneaking utilities in there too. So it's not like it's like a good infrastructure play as well. But also, I can't imagine boring a tunnel from Chicago to Columbus. So I don't know if that's the most practical. But then they've talked about doing the like long length subways. That the basically what that infrastructure would be building is to get to the maglev subways that they want to do. They want to do like basically magnetic levitation subways that sit in a tube and float a little bit above the ground. They have no friction, so they can go like 300 miles an hour. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Again, that'd be great. Space age, that's awesome, but he's got to prove that concept first. I think that the more realistic and easy thing to do would be the original Hyperloop idea, or I think you could also take a lot of these freight trains and repurpose them as almost like a land ferry. You know what I mean? And I think that if you had a train where you could pull up, I mean, isn't that, if I'm not mistaken, this is literally what they do in the Channel, is you pull up and you pull onto a train, and then like I think you can drive through the Channel too, but you pull up, park your car in this like big, giant, train car. And then you just sit there for like 2 hours, and then you pop out on the other side, and they open the doors, and you drive out. You know what I mean? Something like that might have more merit to it in our application, because then everyone has their own personal space, their own personal things. You can still smoke, do whatever. That's all great. I think something like that might be possible, but like in reality, before we got on, I was thinking about it. I was like, man, what would be my like thesis statement? And I guess it's really that states are the people who have to do it. It's not even private companies, and it's not really even the national government. It's just the states. The states on an individual level they can choose to do this, and they can spend the money to do this, and they can, you know, show a real, even if it's not making directly money from the line itself, it's money from people from Cleveland spending their money in Cincinnati, and people from Columbus spending their money in Dayton, and people, you know what I mean? It just like spreading all the money around the state. That's a good thing. So I think that it's going to have to come up to the states on their own. They're going to have to decide to do it on their own, and they need to not people. The problem is people need to not look at like New York and like, you know, Zoran wants to subsidize the public transit and stuff. Maybe New York can do that. I don't know. I don't know the economics, to be honest with you, and I would be an ass to act like I do, but I don't think so, and I definitely know that Ohio starting out is not going to be able to do that. So we need to not look at the pie in the sky version of it, which happens a lot of the time when there's these debates that have, you know, political sides to them. There can't be a pie in the sky. We just have to like whittle away at the problem. I mean, had we started in this 50s and 60s whittling away at this problem by building, you know, a subway from Chicago to Milwaukee or something, you know, anything like that, whatever. We started doing those things, that line would be a fleshed out line. It would be a proved concept, and we can improve upon it now much easier. You know, like we were talking about this in the little town I work in. They closed one road and they made it a community area. So they like put up poles and hung lights, and because they wanted to have a town center. They didn't have like basically a town center, so they wanted to try and make one. So everyone got real mad about it. And I am one of the people who voted on the Chamber of Commerce for it to be there. I voted for it to be there. I never used it. I probably never will use it. I don't have any interest in it. But I also understand that if it gets shelved, it's probably never going to come back. Or it's at least going to be infinitely harder for it to come back. And having a community space is important for the growth of the community. And the growth of the community ultimately benefits everyone, especially me. And that's the same way I feel about this public transit issue. Is it's like if we shelve it, it's so much harder to bring it back. But if we can just chip away at it, you know, then we'll actually accomplish something. You know what I mean? Then we'll have a chance at bettering the whole.
All right. Well, I think we beat that one to death. So I think what we can do is, I think at this point, we're out there, and I think that if anybody from the various states, or anybody from the federal government, if they need advice, you see, it's not going to come cheap. It's not going to come cheap. I want you to understand that. But if Trump, if he needs some advice on mass transit, he's the contact one.
He can call.
But it's not going to come cheap. I mean, I know he's got some deep pockets, and he's going to have to use them.
He's going to have to back the truck up.
That's right. Just not going to give it to him for nothing. But that being the case, so I'll be waiting anxiously to...
on bated breath.
On bated breath. There you go, sir. And I think I think with that, we pretty much concluded. I know that Tony he's been asleep for the last 20 minutes, so I don't. That's what you get. He's been eating too many pierogies. I don't know what the hell he was dropped from the pierogi. It's horrible what they've done to him, but you know he'll be up for it next year. He'll be back. Mr. Pierogi is a nationwide phenomenon. You knew that, did you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He's not
known from sea to shining sea, as they say.
Yes, that's true. And so he's made the region something to be noticed. And so
to me, it's him, and then it's Caleb Williams as far as most important people in Chicago this year.
There you go.
Yes, I'd go that way too.
Speaking of which, how about your Hoosiers, man?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. Well, last night, I have to tell you this. I watched that. I didn't watch it. I took a look at the score. I couldn't believe that score. Now, I thought that they'd squeak by. A lot of people said, oh, no, they beat Oregon before. And they said, oh, yeah, but Oregon be ready for them this time. Nope. And so I figured that they'd be able to maybe get by with maybe 7 points, 10 points, maybe, But they thrashed the living hell out of them.
That is, there's a term in sports for that. That was belt to ass.
Yeah. or some of us old timers just refer to it as an ass whipping.
Yeah.
But the only problem with that is sometimes you get a little bit too confident, you see, and this
For sure.
next group, and they say this, anybody, any of these college groups can beat you on a good
Yep.
day. Any
Yep.
of them, even the ones in the
I mean,
25
even our team, OSU's graded out the best team
Yes.
of all time.
Yes.
It was the
Yes.
grade, and the two teams that beat it are now going to go see each other
Yes.
in the champion. It's I mean, it's crazy. I will tell you, I'm calling it right now, and since this is recorded, thank
Okay.
God, and people know that I call it. Indiana is going to beat their ass
Okay.
bad.
Wow.
Well, if you got to beat something, the ass is a good thing to beat. It's good.
But I'm telling you, I think bad. I think the U is real. They're a cool school, University of Miami. They're awesome. And if they do win, awesome. They deserve it. They're also a very cool school, and they're very deserving. It's like the two most deserving possible teams in right now.
Well,
Go ahead.
they've lost to two teams already this year.
Right.
Where IU has not. IU has not lost to anybody.
No, IU is literally not lost. IU ran through everything, and it could be argued that them beating Ohio State is the reason that they went on to lose to Miami. You know what I mean? That
Yes.
Indiana shook their confidence so hard. You know what I mean? Because I think they did. I think that they were great. But yeah, so they were really, really good. I think that it's cool to see that. It's cool to see the Bears in the playoffs. It's a fun time right now for a little bit of flavor, a little bit of sports. The Bulls are terrible, but that whatever. Yeah. So I turned 30 this week. So next time I come back, I will be wiser and I'll be able to speak with more authority.
Yes. Well, your grandmother's all upset that she wasn't invited to your birthday party, but I said to hell with that. I want to see that guy anyway. So
You guys want to come to Cincinnati?
Cincinnati? Is that where you're going to go? Cincinnati?
Yeah, we're going to this little restaurant in Cincinnati.
Oh, you know anybody that runs it?
No.
Okay. All right.
It's a real nice one.
Okay, well, in that case, I will let you go, sir, and hopefully see you next week. And I want you to be thinking about something else, and beside mass transit, because I don't know if we got. Yes, go ahead. I don't know if we got anywhere. Yeah.
Is that a pun?
Yeah. Yes, it was.
Okay, all right. I feel like we probably next week should do a state of affairs. Go through the front page of the Wall Street Journals, just because.
State of affairs.
Or at least like pick three of the topics.
Yes.
Because it has been.
Look at that, sir.
Yes.
There you go.
Because the newspaper is more entertaining than the internet right now, and that's a sad thing sometimes, but it's got a lot going on in the world, so we probably should get to some more topical stuff.
We'll talk about Tehran, we'll talk about Minneapolis, and talk about a lot of crap, and we'll throw it up against the wall and see if it sticks, okay?
Let's see what happens.
All right. That's it. It's a
Yeah,
wrap.
God bless. That's the Scully Sez podcast. Remember, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere you can get your podcasts, you can listen to us.
TikTok. He's big on TikTok.
And we're big on TikTok. Oh, I forget that one.
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you what. The way I crawl out of the I can see my animal magnetism. I mean, it's unbelievable. Oh, yeah. I'm running for my life on this one. You see what's that? All right.
All right.
On that note, I'll leave you.
All right.
Okay. Bye.